Hello, my name's Jeanette Millard and I'm co-president of Green Hudson. And we've existed in Hudson for 6 or 7 years. We ran the Heat Smart program a few years back. You may have heard of us from that. We work in general to look at Hudson's environment, to try and protect the environment, to try and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in town, and to reduce our carbon footprint. Right now, we are starting a series of speakers, and we're calling that series Climate Cafes. You'll see news of upcoming speakers very soon, and hopefully they'll be held here in the McClellan Room in the library on Tuesday evening and Saturday morning. They'll be the same, so if you can come Tuesday, you don't have to come Saturday. And we're having a series of speakers on small subjects that have to do with helping the environment and helping to reduce the effects of climate change. So, for example, we have Pam Hellenick from the conservation agent for the town, and she'll be talking about natural climate solutions on May 2nd. And we have people coming to talk about native plant gardens, electrifying your house, about electric vehicles, about transportation possibilities in town, and the list goes on because there's a lot we can do. I tend to dwell on the what can we do aspect of things, and I'm writing for the town. We, Green Hudson, are writing a climate action plan for the town, and what we want to do is summarize what some of the areas of need are for us to respond to the effects of climate change, and to learn about what we can each do and what we can do as a town to address the needs that are arising. So those are what Climate Cafes will be, and we're having them from now, which is April, till the end of 2023 at least. And at each of these, you'll hear some about what Green Hudson is doing and our climate action plan, and a short speaker, 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll be asking people who attend about ideas. What would be useful? What would be helpful to you? We have taken a poll and we have almost 500 respondents about what people are interested in and what's keeping people from taking action. And part of that is needing more information. Part of it is the financial constraints. And so we are also gathering information about where the rebates and the grants are from the federal government and from the state, and even from our local Hudson Light and Power. So stay tuned. We'll be having a whole series of speakers, and I hope you'll attend them. They're very interesting, and they're not gloom and doom. They are about what we can do to do the best we can in this situation in our environment. We also have a presentation this coming Saturday. First, we'll hear from Brian White, who's the other co-president of Green Hudson, and he'll be talking about how we got here. And then Per Gilstrom, who's speaking tonight, will also talk about green electrification, how green energy integrates with the grid. That's the talk you're going to hear tonight, and he'll also be talking on Saturday. So we hope you'll show up for part or all of those presentations. And also on Saturday, which is Earth Day, we'll be having outdoor, is it supposed to be nice? I hope, outdoor kind of petting zoo of electric garden equipment and vehicles, and children's stories and information for adults and children. And inside we'll be doing our Climate Cafe. So I hope to see you then. And I'll turn it over to Per Gilstrom, who is much more of an expert than I am about this subject, and I'm planning to learn a lot tonight. So thank you, Per.
Hi, I'm Per Gilstrom, and I am, as Jeanette said, I'm part of Green Hudson. I'm one of the directors there. I also work for a company called NLX. NLX is a company of 60,000 people worldwide. And we basically are providing power plants across the world, and we are going to turn them all green by 2030, so no more fossil fuels. So I've been lucky to work with them for 10 years as a software chief architect for them. So these are big, large systems we're talking about. So Part of my role in Green Hudson is to do education, and education is a little bit more about what's behind all this. So I'm going to go through a short presentation, about 20 minutes, and we'll start with why do we look at green energy. Jeanette mentioned climate change, and climate change we can see all around us, and we've been seeing it gradually and more accelerated lately. We get all these fossil fuels and burning and creating carbon dioxide and other gases that are poisonous to the environment. It has a lot of effect on the environments. Droughts, we saw droughts in California and forest fires. Now they have flooding and the opposite. And wind damage, cyclones, tornadoes, all kinds of disasters are happening and have a negative impact on our crops and on poor air quality. These are just a few things. So everyone obviously sees what's going on, and you have to really close your eyes and hide under a rock to not notice it. So how does it actually come to this? Well, pollution is caused by individual businesses, individuals that are polluting themselves a little bit. And then you multiply that, and then you multiply it, and you multiply it, and all of a sudden it's huge. And we see this, different countries, especially industrialized, are doing a lot of pollution. So whether it's the Hudson Rotary, where cars are driving around downtown and you're sitting outside enjoying a glass of wine or a dinner at the Rotary and you have the fumes in your face. Or whether it's downtown Boston traffic, or whether it is India, Delhi traffic, where you can't even see the cars in front of you because of all of the pollution. So the solution to it is to do the opposite. So the individuals and every business each have to do their piece. It's together with all of that that we can actually start making the change. There's not one single thing here. It's everybody together. And one observation you can see is the people that are less fortunate are usually the ones that are hit the hardest. So they have less resources and less ability to deal with it, and they usually take the worst of it. So that's the problem space. So I'm here to try to be optimistic, because what I'm going to talk about is some of the solutions. Right? And we call it electrification. It's a strategy. It's a strategy. So what is it? Electrification is the process of powering by electricity. So it's the introduction of electric power and changing over from what used to be fossil fuel, oil, what have you, natural gas, and leveraging new technologies to do that. And there are two parts of this. One is the generation of electricity. How do we generate electricity so we can use it? And the other one is how do we consume electricity? So there are two parts of this. And if we end up doing more of this, the benefits are the opposite of what I talked about earlier, a reduction of greenhouse gases. We can get lower costs, especially in the long run. We can talk about costs because high upfront costs is sometimes high. Better efficiency, and we can use it across everything, industries, homes, anywhere. Electricity is a source of energy that can be leveraged everywhere. So, how many know how our usual traditional grid actually works? Not many do. So, what we have is a power plant sitting somewhere, typically burning natural gas, coal, or petroleum. They produce, by pumping in this electricity that comes out, that electricity goes into a transformer that makes it high power, high voltage, which is the best way to transmit electricity from the power plant to closer to your home. So these are the high power lines. You see high warning for high power, high voltage power lines. And they go for long distances transporting electricity down to a transformer near you, which is called a step down to a lower voltage that you can actually start consuming in your house. And every now and then these blow, you hear them, and they go, and you have to replace them. So this is how this goes from tradition. So how efficient is this? Well, one would think transmitting, you will lose something, and how much do you think you would lose? I'm going to tell you right now. It's 5% of the energy produced, electricity here, is lost taking it over here. Okay, that seems like not too bad. The energy here, if you take the energy of natural gas and pump it in, translate it into electricity, the loss here is 60%. So 2/3 almost are lost in generating electricity. So at the end, you get 35%. So of all the oil and gas you put in here, you produce electricity, that's 35% of that energy. The rest is going up in smoke, so to speak. Probably a good word to use here, because a lot of it's pollution. So that's pretty inefficient, right? For Hudson, it's a little different. We have a nuclear power plant that produces electricity. It's more efficient than the natural gas and coal plants are. However, it does produce nuclear waste. And nuclear waste, so you have more efficiency, it's lower cost, which we see here in Hudson. We're like way lower than the rest of the state. But the byproduct nuclear waste, US does not have a central place where you could store nuclear waste. So each power plant has to store its own. And it's for up to 50 years. Unfortunately, radioactivity is thousands of years. So we don't really have a long-term solution for what to do. As long as this works, it's fine. When we have problems here, it's bad. We've seen Chernobyl and other things causing long-term problems, right? So this is not really a long-term solution either. So let's talk about a couple of terms. I'm going to define a couple of terms. Renewable, you hear clean, you have green. What are these things? So renewable energy is produced from natural resources. It replenishes quickly and never runs out, so that's why it's renewable. Green energy is a subset of that, and it does not produce any pollution. That's the difference. Renewables can also produce pollution, and they have a small environmental footprint. So green energy is a subset of that. So what's clean energy? Well, clean energy does produce pollution. It's not renewable, but it does produce byproducts. So clean and green is not the same, although it's used a lot to mean the same thing. So it's a little, if you want to be refined, you look at that. Fossil fuels is pollution and not renewable. So just as an example, solar, what do you think solar is? Solar is a green energy, happens to be renewable also. Natural gas is a fossil fuel. Geothermal, a green energy. Biomass is renewable, but it's not clean. It burns wood pellets, and it produces. Nuclear is the clean energy. So we have clean energy in Hudson, not green energy. And wind, finally, is green, right? So that's just an example of a few. So green energy generation and new technologies is the next topic here, and these are often referred to as distributed energy resources. We call them DERs in our industry. That what it means is these are technology that generate an energy distributed on your house or on top of an office building and so on. So solar panels, for example, are all over the place. They're not in one single place. They could be, but they don't have to. Wind turbines are also spread out and could be together as a wind farm or individual. Biomass technologies exist to generate heat. We have heat pumps that do air conditioning and cooling that can be air-based or that could be ground source. I'll mention two other technologies: storage, which is like big batteries. That's a groundbreaking technology that changed green energy, because that allows electricity to be stored for long periods of time. Green hydrogen is another one that's also storage. That's a way to store energy in a liquid that you then can use as fuel for a car or something, or a bus. So all of the advantages of these are you get improved reliability because there's no single point of failure. So if the power plant has issues, no one is getting power. If one solar panel isn't working, there are plenty others, so you can actually spread it out and it's more reliable. Efficiency, these things are typically closer to the source. If you have solar panels on your house, you can use that electricity in your house. You don't have to send it anywhere, so you don't lose too much. And you can use them for production or consumption, or generation or consumption. It's lower cost over time. I have solar panels. It took me 5 years, although they predicted 7 years to pay off. It's paying off. I've had it for more than 7 now. So it's lower cost, not right up front, but it does pay off. You can combine these in what's called microgrids and macrogrids. I'll talk more about that in a second. So heating and cooling technologies, I mentioned a couple of them. We have air source heat pumps that you see a lot around different houses. People put them in, very efficient, or ground source, even more efficient, but it costs more because you have to dig deep to get to the further down where you can generate the heat or cooling from the lower temperature in the earth underneath. We have modern wood heating. The modernized is way better, less polluting, and solar hot water. So these are other technologies for heating and cooling. So large-scale storage, or batteries, if you think of that, is, like I said, groundbreaking, because they're accelerating quickly how these are coming about. So they're actually, when energy is produced by renewable sources, you just pump that into a battery to store it. And massive amount of energy can be stored there. And you can then discharge the batteries from when you need them. So when energy is needed, the batteries can be drained of the energy and used. Okay, so you can use that to drive the peak down, the peak hours, and for many other ways. So I'm going to talk to you about something called the duck curve. Okay, so what's the duck curve? So if you look at how people use energy, from morning, midday to evening, it looks like a duck, because in the morning everybody gets up, turns on all the stuff in the house, make coffee, what have you, go to work, and in the evening they come home, and again, you start using a lot of the things in your house. And so overnight the load this is called a load. The load is low during the night, and when you have solar generation, when does that happen? Well, it happens midday, which happens to be the time you don't really need it. So what do you do here? You want to do something called peak shaving. You put a battery in. So what happens here, as you're generating solar, you actually store stuff into the battery. You store the energy away. Then in the evening or in the morning, you take energy from the battery, and so the peak that you had is now dropped down to a lower peak. Okay. And this peak usually is when the power plant's kicking the dirtiest generation they have, generators and other things to do. So if you can offset that with renewable green energy, that one goal. Even more importantly, if you're not able to meet this need, you get a brownout or blackout, or eventually you have to build another power plant, and that's not a small thing. So green energy can effectively do what's called peak shaving and can lower this. So the modernized electric grid uses all these things. It may use a thermal power plant, so use or nuclear power plant, biomass, solar powered, wind powered, hydroelectric, all these combined. Transmission lines are still there and needed. You put a control center in here because you have to coordinate where you get all the energy from, and why would I get it from one versus the other? You'd rather have clean energy into the system and not use the fossil fuel burning stuff. And on this side you see the consumers of energy, whether they're industries, buildings, or homes, or cars. So the new grid is now looking like this more and more. A microgrid is, you see there's a switch, I can turn off the usual grid, and these things can live by themselves. It generates enough energy to feed whoever needs it here. So it could be a small community, it could be a business park, it could be anything of that. The switch is here if they ever needed to, they could. And there's a really good example of that. If you want to take a ride to Air, Alltown Fresh in Air, they have a microgrid there that my company was involved putting in, and it has solar panels, it has an industrial battery, and it has EV chargers, and it's self-contained. It doesn't use any power from the grid. It's a good example of what can be done, right? And it's just around the corner. If you ever in Air, just go into Alltown Fresh and check it out. You know, so then there are, just to illustrate some of the things, you can make large plants of this. So these are solar panels, and these are all batteries. This is Florida Light and Power. This exists today. I'm not going to go through the details, but it's pretty impressive, the kinds of things you could do with the solar and batteries to actually create a power plant that feeds. When I think they had here capable of powering 329,000 homes for 2 hours solely from this. It's quite a bit of energy that you can create, and these get more efficient every day. What I'm working on, which is really exciting, is the future, which is called a virtual power plant. This is where there's no fossil fuels anymore, and this is if you see, you draw from almost everything we can in terms of green energy. But the problem with it is it's complex because you have to worry about what the weather is now, what the weather is tomorrow, what the energy cost is now, what the energy cost is tomorrow, how much battery capacity do I have? Should I charge it now? Should I discharge it now? When do I do what? Is there going to be a demand peak soon? What do I do in case of that? Do I use something called demand response to shade it? All this is a very complex problem that's being worked by many companies. If you look up on Google VPP, you'll see a lot of hits on VPP, virtual power plants. So now I'm going to talk about what can we electrify then? What, as consumers? Cars? Yes. School buses? Trains? Do more instead of diesel trains, why not have electric trains? Airplanes. Did you know there are electric airplanes now that can fly 400 or 500 miles? Cargo planes that while they're being unloaded and loaded again, they're already charged to go again. So the batteries are charged on the plane, you can fly 400 or 500 miles today. Those exist. DHL has got a test plane out. You can electrify your house, right? Your home. That's a lot of things can be done. The heat pumps, from electric clothes dryer, or just hang the clothes outside. It's even better. You know, PV solar, EV chargers, all these things can be done in your house. There are plenty of things that can be done. Even garden tools, right? So lawnmowers and so on. But there are challenges. So some of the challenges, not all of them here, this is adoption of new technologies takes time. But we're seeing a lot and more, and it's being accelerated. And we have infrastructure issues because of the old distribution system are not able to take the new capacity. We're using more and more electricity. That has to be built out and changed. There are too few EV charging stations. There's a lack of storage, battery storage. We still have to do more. There's a cost, high upfront cost. There are incentives to help. They change all the time. They're hard to find and figure out whether you can get it or not. And we have been talking to the senators in Massachusetts to get help, get a centralized place where we can find that. There's manufacturing, supply chain, even lack of resources like minerals, lithium and other things. Laws. We need laws to help us do this, but there are also, as we sit here, laws being created to prevent this, believe it or not. And that's based a lot on these things, myths and misinformation. There's plenty of that too. So part of this educational piece is trying to cut through some of this. So this is not all the challenges, but some of them. And we need to start having the conversation, find ways to break through some of this, work locally, but also push globally for more. And if we do, we have something to look forward, more positive than hearing about the horrible things climate change is doing. What can we do? So I leave this quote because I like it. It's from 1931 from Thomas Edison, and he said, "I put my money on sun and solar energy. What a source of power. I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that." I sure hope he's right. And that's my presentation. So
I want to talk a little bit about some specific efforts that Green Hudson is undertaking now. I already talked about the Climate Action Plan, and that's a longer term. We'll probably, hopefully, get that into action in a couple years, but we'll have it written and get input over the next year. And that's a long-term strategy with some very short-term actions that people can take, which you'll find out about at the climate cafes. One thing that we're doing as for Green Hudson, for the town, is we're doing a climate change survey. We're asking all of you residents to go to greenhudson.org, and you can find the survey there, but you can also scan it and take it online yourself. And what we're doing is we're asking people a series of questions that ask you about how concerned you are about climate change and what would prevent you from doing something. And so some of the results, we have about, let's see, how many results do we have right now? About 470 responses so far, and we'd really love to get a lot more. And it'll take you 5 minutes. So please go to greenhudson.org and fill it out, the survey. One of the questions, though, is how concerned are you about greenhouse gas emissions and global warming and their effects on Hudson and on your family? So you could answer not concerned, a little bit concerned, concerned, very concerned, and extremely concerned. So all of the concerned areas added up are over 70% of people in Hudson are concerned with what climate change is going to do. And there's not a huge understanding of what people can do specifically, because it seems like a giant problem. And it is, but we can all work on it separately and as a town. So we're trying to have our climate cafes to talk about what individuals can do, from gardening to getting heat pumps, and also what the town can do for town buildings, for school buildings, for transportation, for charging stations. And there's a lot of money in the federal budget for towns who apply for this, and for people, individuals. If you want to get an electric vehicle starting later this year, you can get, depending on your income, a lot of rebate money and a tax credit. So pay attention to that if you're in the market for an electric vehicle. At any rate, more than 70% are concerned. But I have to also say that 18% are not concerned at all. And so we have to do more education also about what we can do about it. So should the town create a plan for including energy use reduction in new and existing town and school buildings? from 470 responses, 79%, well, almost 80% said yes. Some said, I don't know, and 12.6% said no. And then when we talk about what are the barriers to you to make changes to adopt green energy, all the things that Per was talking about and more that we'll be talking about this year. And it was check all that applied. And people said it costs too much. Let's see, about 58% said it costs too much. It does. And as Per talked about, the upfront costs are frequently more expensive than most people can afford. So we need to get our government and our state government, federal and state, to help people to purchase these things. And we've been working on that with our heat pump strategy, but we're going to continue to work on it. So cost is a big barrier. I don't know enough about what my options are, and that is, I can't read with these glasses, 32%. And that's what we want to talk about in these climate cafes. What are the options? What do you need to buy? What don't you need to buy? What can you do in your own garden with native plants and everything in between? It's not a priority. 25%, it's not a priority. We're hoping through education and outreach that people consider it a priority. We hope you consider it a priority for your kids and grandchildren and for our own comfort right now. No need, it's working fine now. Almost 18% said there's no need, it's working fine now. There are going to be people who are always thinking, no, change isn't good and things are okay the way they are. But we're hoping most people will see from our climate change that we're already feeling that there's things we need to do in order to stop the trend. And that trend is continuing very rapidly. No barriers. I'm adopting green energy solutions, 21%. So thank you for if you're in that 21%. And please talk to other people, friends, neighbors, and the town, to talk to what we all can do to adopt more green energy solutions, okay? One thing that Hudson's doing, no, the Green Hudson are doing, we have a 5-year plan that we're in year 2 of to make Hudson Fest zero waste by 2026. It was supposed to be by 2025, but the pandemic prevented us since there was no Hudson Fest. So now we want all of the single-use items are recycled. We want at the end of 2026 at that Hudson Fest, we want there to be no waste, everything recycled, compostable. Last year, we ourselves staffed 3 recycling stations. I hope you saw them. So along with trash cans, there's a recycle bin, and we asked people to put in everything that can be recycled, glass and plastic. And we're gonna have more of those this year. So please look for us. This year we're asking the vendors to start to hand out recyclable or compostable materials. Mostly it's food vendors. And we did inform the vendors last year that we're hoping this year that they'll use more recyclable and compostable. So the compostables are, there's cups and straws and basically your dishes, but they're compostable. And if we can get the vendors to do that, and we're going to help them do that this year, we're going to hand out examples of those products and where to get them, and hopefully if we can raise the money, we're going to give vendors money in order to make that switch happen. And we're also advocating bringing your own. If you really want a straw or need a straw, bring your own. Bring your own mug. See if you can get your lemonade, which I always get every year. If you can get that fresh squeezed lemonade in your own mug, or bring your own silverware, or if you have a wooden or a glass or paper straw, bring that and use it. So next year we're going to ask the Chamber of Commerce in Hudson to officially endorse our zero waste proposal and require compostable or recyclable cups, utensils, and flatware. So we'll go from educating to requiring, and we hope we get that support from the Chamber of Commerce. In 2025, we're going to have more compost and recycling in 6 locations. We have Black Earth Compost supporting us to use their bins this year for composting. And by 2026, all of the trash stations at Green Hudson will have recycle, compost, and trash. And all single-use items at the event will be recyclable or compostable. So that is a way that we can organize and work with a few other people to make a difference on one day at Green Hudson at Hudson Fest. And we hope that is an example of what we can do for public events and also at home or when you go to a restaurant. So our goal is to create possibilities where we can reduce our output and also reduce the trash that we're generating. We also have someone in Green Hudson, a committee that's working on banning polystyrene in town, which is mostly styrofoam. And we're going to ask the restaurants in town to make the same move we're asking the vendors to make over time. And we know from other towns and other restaurants that it does work. And there are restaurants here in Hudson that already give you paper straws and have compostable flatware. So if you go to a couple of those restaurants and pay attention to where you go, please thank them for doing that. It's a really great thing, and we didn't have to strong arm them. They wanted to do it. And as you might also know, Green Hudson sponsored a plastic bag ban, and that was also by the Plastic Reduction Committee of Green Hudson. So we're trying to get a lot done. It takes a while, it takes education, and it takes you to participate in it. But it's very hopeful. If you get worried about climate change, even when there's a big storm, or you get worried when there are droughts or floods, the best way for me to calm my worries is to take action. And you can join us at Green Hudson. We meet the 3rd Sunday of every month at 6 o'clock online, and soon at the Avidia Community Room. But so we welcome you to join our group, but you don't have to join. You can just find out about what changes you can make. And I feel very hopeful, and I'm doing things to make that hope a reality. So thank you very much. Thank you to Pear, and thank you to HUD-TV. And we'll be talking to you. Please look for our schedule of climate cafes coming out soon. Thanks very much.